is Carl Holtman, which he is based in Turkey, so he's further away. I am in Dayton, Ohio. He's our partner in abroad. So we will be doing this presentation, and it will be focusing on funding your U.S. education. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen right now. Okay, so Wright State University is in Dayton, Ohio, which is pretty much at the center of the Midwest. Whoops, how would my, it's not, okay. Now, when we think of common funding, we need to think of the trifecta: scholarships, loans, and assistantships. Scholarships come in different formats, so do loans, and assistantships are one of those things that every student wants to have. We're going to focus, and I especially going to focus a little bit more on the scholarships. Carl is going to go a little bit more into depth into the loan and assistantship, but we're going to try to cover as much ground as possible. Now, what is a scholarship? So scholarship is a source of funding that usually is based on certain criteria. It can be GPA, it can be need-based, essentially, that you do need money for doing that. Carl will go a little bit more in depth about the need and the merit, but just to be very brief, a need-based scholarship is usually more into the private world of institutions in the United States rather than public institutions. It's very, very hard for international students to find something like that. However, on the merit side, you can find quite some things, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Now, what are sources of scholarship? Usually the university will have a general fund and a general university fund that students will be able to pull out some scholarships from. Specific scholarship for international students that are underrepresented on campus, so a specific population that maybe we want to target to bring them to campus. Scholarship are specific also to the department, so based on certain areas there might be more funding added to that. And then there is the well-known athletic scholarships for certain types of sports that the university may have. Now, this is where I am actually. You guys can tell by my name. Sono Italiano, so I was born in the States, but I grew up in Italy. And a lot of things were not explained to me when I came here to the United States. So I wanted to explain to you where to find scholarships for your universities. And these are general things that you can find in any university. So usually to find based on the schools that you're thinking of going to, I would start by looking for their international scholarships. And you can do that by two ways. One, going to their international page, which is usually the name of the institution /international. That can be, for example, for Wright State will be wright.edu/international, and it will take them to the page. Or you can go to the scholarship page, which is what I would recommend. Usually you go to the scholarship page, you will see also scholarship that maybe are not coming through the general funds, what I was saying earlier, but maybe from outside sources. So if you do anything, Ohio State /scholarship, Berkeley /scholarship, 90% of the time you will get to the scholarship pages, and that is a good way to find things. Now, another way is to look into companies that are in the field that you are selecting for your major. Usually you want to look for companies that maybe have an international recognition or maybe have really close ties to your country. I took a picture over here on the right, and you can see this over here is the Wright State's page for scholarships. And over here, this is Microsoft scholarship page. Yes, Microsoft has a large program for scholarships for students that might be going into certain determined fields. So it's always a good idea to do your research and to try to find some things. Now, there are also out there a lot of search engines dedicated for the finding of scholarships. You may use them, but be very cautious because it's very easy to maybe find yourself in a not so good website. So usually I will recommend try to go, if there are any search engines, try to go through the college itself. So maybe the college will have on their scholarship page search engine links that you can look at. Now, the categories of scholarships are merit-based, need-based, or major-specific. We kind of went over it a little bit. So the merit-based is where it's going to look at your grades, at your the type of test that you may have had. Like for undergrad, SAT, ACT. For grad, it could be GRE. But there is different things, and in different schools may do it a little bit different. Need-based are based on the financial need, or more common. It's more common though in private in university, and it's very, very hard to see it in public universities. Then major specific is very straightforward, where you could pretty much be getting some funding from the department, maybe to do some research, or maybe just because you are a talented performing arts student and they want to give you some more some more money to come to their institution. Now, Wright State Scholarship are very different for international students. We do have other things, but I wanted to also highlight this. Not all scholarships you have to do a separate application to be able to come to attend that scholarship, to obtain that scholarship. At Wright State, you can go ahead and do your regular application, and then based on the GPA that we will evaluate, we will assign your scholarship based on those tiers. You can see it a lot of times, obviously, they're divided by undergrad and grad. So not every single time you need to worry about where can I apply for scholarships. A lot of times they might be already in there with your application for admission. Now, there are scholarships available at Wright State, other than the ones that I just showed you, the merit scholarships. But there's also a valedictorian that is available for students that are doing their undergrad. They can submit, as long as they submit a document or a piece of paper or a letter from their in high school determining that they were a top student in their high school. They might be able to get $9,000 per year. There's also the Trustee Scholarship that is valued almost at $20,000. But they are given out once a year, so it might, you might want to apply sooner rather than later if those are the type of things. But other schools do have similar things that what we have. Some have more, some have less. And now let's Carl move on with the next segment, we'll say.
Yes, this is where I get to take over. Okay, so Giancarlo gave an overview of the scholarships, some that are specifically available at Wright State. Now, how do you get those scholarships? Well, as he alluded to right before we did the handoff, apply early. Make sure you have your applications done generally 9 months ahead of time. So if you're looking for an August or September start, generally try to have your applications done by the end of December prior or middle of January. And I know for especially international students, this idea of applying early, well before time is, sometimes it's really difficult to do. But I promise you, the investment that you put in terms of applying early will pay off. So keep that in mind, apply early. So what's going to be part of these more competitive scholarship applications? They may require separate applications, which will also generally require letters of recommendation. So generally, if you're applying for competitive undergraduate scholarships, they may ask for letters of recommendation from maybe the English language teacher at your school, as well as maybe a math reference, possibly a science reference as well, and maybe a college counselor if you have those in your schools. I know sometimes internationally that's rare, so keep that in mind. The reasons letters of recommendation are important is because it gives the scholarship committee as well as the university itself, a different set of eyes on you as an applicant. because, you know, this is really one of the only ways that, at least that we used to be able to, you know, judge applicants, was looking at letters of recommendation, as well as I'll get to kind of your statement of purpose or personal essay. That was generally the way we would evaluate applications. Now, of course, the way that we've gone nowadays, we may start doing Zoom meetings and all that other stuff, but right now, letters of recommendation will be important because of what they do. Go ahead and proceed to the next slide. Giancarlo, next slide, next slide. Okay, so what I'll talk about, you know, I generally call this statement of purpose, and this part was geared more towards, let's say, graduate type students, but the information in here I'll also tailor to our undergraduate audience as well. So statement of purpose is what you call it when you're applying to a graduate school. If you're applying as an undergrad, it might be known more as the personal essay. So just keep that in mind. So what I'll give you now, you can tailor both ways. I'll go ahead and proceed to the next slide. So your statement of purpose or personal essay, again, this is how the university gets to know who you are as a candidate. So generally, I tell students to keep in mind what we're taught, at least in the American system, of the 5-paragraph essay format. And that includes your first introduction paragraph, and then your next 3 paragraphs, each kind of center on a various different topic. Generally, it might be, the first one is introducing yourself. The second one is why you want to pursue studies. And then following that is where you see yourself in 5 years, essentially how is this undergraduate education or graduate education going to help me in the future? And then your third paragraph is why this specific school you're applying to. And then you're going to conclude. So as you're going through this, you know, what I have here is highlighting a couple of important things. So have you engaged in undergraduate research if you're applying for graduate school? Have you done volunteer activities, things like that, if you're applying as an undergraduate? And what I'll also say for students who might be thinking, you know, this is a lot of information, we will, of course, have this PowerPoint emailed out at some point, or you can always contact us and we're happy to do that. Go ahead and go to the next slide, Giancarlo. So again, what you're going to want to center on is specific reasons why you're applying to a particular school. If you can tailor it in that way. I know at the undergraduate level, a lot of students pursue the common application, which might call for a more generic style personal essay. If that is the case, since you might not be writing about why a specific school, this is where you tailor to why you want to come to the US in general. So this is where you might center on subjects of, you know, the flexibility of the US system, how that allows you to double major. You really explore your options as opposed to being locked into a specific field of study if you were to stay in your home country. So that's what you might want to focus on at the undergraduate level. If you're a graduate student applying, then your statement of purpose is, again, you're looking at why are you applying to this specific university. So graduate students, you need to be a lot more specific. At the undergraduate level, you need to really center more, focus more on why the US in general if you're using that common application. Go ahead and go to the next slide. There we go. So at the graduate level, you're going to want to include a list of potential faculty that you may want to study with. I mean, that is important, you know, because it shows the university that you've done your research. You're not just sending out a general statement of purpose to any graduate program that'll take you. You've really shown that I've researched this school. It is a good fit for me because you have faculty members that are also engaged in research that I am interested in. You're encouraged, you know, I encourage you to look at the universities. This is both for undergraduate and graduate level. Look at the research programs going on at the university because it gives you a sense of what that university focuses on. So Wright State University, we have some interesting programs with cybersecurity as well as marketing. And a lot of that is, you know, where we are located. So, you know, look at us in the center of the US. We have a lot of marketing that goes on around us. cybersecurity because of our ties with the U.S. Air Force, which has the largest Air Force base right next to our campus. So, I mean, there's a lot of interesting things that go on at our university. The same for other universities as well. Look at what their research they're doing, because it kind of gives you an idea of, what you might be able to engage in. For graduate students, I always like to say that the statement of purpose is also the first point where you're going to make an ask for your funding. So your final paragraph or your final sentence should read, you would like to be considered for any funding that may be available from your department, whether in the form of graduate assistantships, which we'll touch on shortly, or fellowships. And fellowships is kind of what we refer to as scholarships at the graduate level sometimes. Go ahead, next slide. Student loans. Student loans are, there are loan providers that will provide typically more towards the graduate level in the STEM disciplines, but there are, I think, one or two providers that will also look at someone who's in the 3rd or 4th year of undergraduate as well. And these are more commercial international providers. You may have systems there in Brazil as well to get student loans. I'm not familiar if you do or not, but in general, the way that these may work at the graduate level is, again, they tend to be more STEM, so engineering or science type focused or business related, and they're typically for students pursuing a master's degree, because the whole idea behind the student loans for some of these international providers is that you're going to do a 2-year master's degree and then potentially take advantage of the OPT options in the US, which if you're doing a STEM degree could be up to 3 years of work experience. And hopefully that'll stay. Go ahead, go to the next slide, Giancarlo. Typically, some of these private student loans, they will not ask for a cosigner, so there's no collateral required. And it's, again, towards international students. There's no upfront fee, quick decisions, things like that. Next slide. Most loans that you'll get, again, if you can get some locally from Brazil, it may be the same, but they can cover up to 100% of the cost of attendance. And the international providers generally will then send the funds directly to the university. So it doesn't have to come to you first. You have an agreement, they send it straight to the university. You have nothing to worry about. It's great. Go ahead, next slide. And then there's ways that you can repay the loan. And again, it's typically for students who are doing OPT, and they can be anywhere up to 15 years. So it's one way to look at, in addition to scholarship. So for Wright State, for example, you can get a scholarship, and then depending upon the program, currently for us, it's computer science or engineering, you could take out a loan at the master's level to cover any other shortfall. Go ahead, next slide. Is this where I hand it back to you, Giancarlo? Tuition and fees.
So this is something, again, that I've thought, based on my personal experience. A lot of times when we post these, when colleges post this, we'll say graphic on their website to what is the tuition, what is the annual total. A lot of times students do not realize that this is really something that we do as an estimate. So the first number, the tuition over there, that obviously is going to be a definite, because it's based on 12 credit hours and so on and so forth, and what an F1 student should be aware of. Now, however, when you're looking at that total number, that 26,000 over there, that is calculating all these different estimates that you need to understand that are overestimations of what possibly something could cost. So if you are coming to Dayton, Ohio, to come to Wright State University, that $9,000 estimate, it's a large estimate. I mean, you can definitely spend less than $9,000 per year in living expenses. And living expenses includes also like food and groceries and all that. If you look it up online, Dayton, Ohio is actually one of the most affordable cities in the Midwest. So definitely that number is way larger than it is. But you should aim for that just so that we can present that for the Homeland Security for you to be able to get your immigration documents. Now, books as well. Books in the world of World Wide Web, we all know that there are definitely a lot of ways to be able to get books at a cheaper price. So even that number, it probably is a little bit more than what it is, but we like to be overestimating so that you guys can be prepared when you're coming on campus. Also the insurance, that is also an estimation. Wright State does have an insurance that does on campus, but that is also estimating on what could possibly be. So this is just to give you an idea, is that when you see these numbers, you shouldn't be extremely scared or go ahead and essentially freak out for that big gigantic number that you see. Now, on the next slide, I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about how the application flows, and to remind you that where you should start for any application is on the /international. It's the easiest thing to remember. You can start, I think Wright State is at wright.edu/international. You click on the apply button over there, and then you start your journey. Now, the application process is a very multi-layered situations. Different things happen with the application. So when you start with creating your account, you did not start an application yet. The application is started when you have filled at least 2 or 3 fields into the application form. So you need to start filling out the form, and then once you have submitted the application, then you have completed that first step. Okay. Now, submitting the application, obviously there could be application waiver codes which are available for Wright State in other universities. You start with the application waiver code, or you can pay out of pocket, however it works best for you. You upload your documents after you have submitted your application. Now, the way that some schools see the uploading of documents are looked at first academic, and then financial in anything that is immigration related, so passport and so on. What I advise for you is to upload everything that you can as soon as you have it, okay? So if you're, for example, are looking at, if you already have your bank statement and it meets that number that is available, that is asked to you from the university, and that big number without the scholarships, go ahead and upload it. Nothing is going to take it away from it. That's not going to work against you. So go ahead and upload it and have it out of the way. Everything that you have, as soon as you have it, just go ahead and upload it. Now, that documents are going to be evaluated by an admission team, and they're going to go ahead and be sent to the department for review at the graduate level especially. So the graduate department is going to go ahead and make that decision, send it back to admissions, and find out. The reason why I'm going through this is also because you guys need to know at where stage you are to be able to go ahead and tell, it's essentially to know where you need to also contact for information. So let's say you want to know the status of your documentation. Start always with the admissions team. Ask them, where is your application? If they say it's with the department, don't continue contacting the admissions, but contact the department. It's fine to contact them and reach out and find out and let them know that you're really interested about their college and that you want to know what's going on. Obviously, don't contact them every day, but if you contact them a few times in a month, that's fine, as long as so that they can know that you're really eager to come to that institution. Now, also look for something like this, okay? Every school in the United States will have either a flyer similar to this, or will have an entire page similar to this. Again, I ask you again to go to the international page to find out everything that there is in there. But you need to pay very close attention, not only at the admission requirements, but also when is it that you need to submit your application? How long do I have the time? You always want to try to look at these things and do as fast and as best as you can to meet within those deadlines. It's always to me at least, it's always been very useful to have a checklist of the things that I need, and then go and check them every day. All the time that you put something in there, just go ahead and check it out. it will give you a sense of reward, but it also is going to move you forward through the process. Now we are pretty much done with our presentation. This is my direct email. You can contact me via email easily. Carl has his email and also his WhatsApp number. You can contact us at any time with any questions that you may have. There's also our Facebook page that is dedicated for international admissions. We do live events every Friday and Tuesday. We try to have on Fridays our faculty and staff Fridays, and on Tuesdays our testimony Tuesdays from students. So if you want to know about Wright State a little bit more, I would highly recommend for you to attend those events. Carl, do you have anything else you want to add?
Well, I mean, I've been answering a few questions as we've been going along here in the chat. So I think one of the things that I want to emphasize that some of the students were asking on the financials, yes, we as universities do tend to overestimate the living expenses. The reason we do that is we want to make sure that you have a realistic expectation, that you also have a cushion in case there's unexpected expenses that come up, throughout the year. This year was a great example. Many students having to leave suddenly and, needing to buy plane tickets or things like that. So when we overestimate those living expenses, it's to give you a cushion. I mean, yes, you could live much cheaper than that $9,000 per year in Dayton, Ohio, but you can also live very comfortably if you do, kind of aim towards that 9,000. So generally it's overestimated.
Yes. One of the key things that Wright State, for example, has that is in this slide you see certified welcoming. Dayton is a certified welcoming city, and what that means is that we have a very diverse population, and we do have a lot of even Brazilian, a large Brazilian population in Dayton. So there is always the opportunity to maybe share homes and share rooms and stuff like that. So the idea for us to overestimate is so that you are going to be okay no matter what situation is happening, and kind of like what Carl said, as what happened right now, essentially. And at least you would definitely be prepared if you're aiming for that big number. Were there any other questions?
Well, yeah, I'm going to take a couple more that came up here. Christina points out, yes, Christina, we are named after the Wright brothers who invented the airplane in Dayton, Ohio. So, that is where we get our name from. And also the other great invention from Dayton, Ohio is the cash register. So I like to say that we're the birthplace of aviation and business. So it's a great place to study in that sense.
And also the electronic starter, right? Kettering.
Okay, there you go. I think the state of Ohio has more actually inventors or inventions, like our patents and everything like that. So it is a great place to be.
Yes.
And I see, okay, Fran, I see you're asking about assistantships as well. So generally for assistantships at the graduate level, there can be of three varieties is what I like to say. It can be a teaching assistantship where you might be tasked with teaching or helping a professor, if they're teaching biology 101, you might do some of the laboratory work or a recitation session as a teaching assistant. You can be a research assistant where you are actively engaged in research and part of a research project at the university level. Or you can be just essentially a graduate assistant. Maybe it's an administrative type position in a certain department. So there's kind of three different versions of those. What I tell students is don't be disappointed if you're not offered an assistantship when you immediately apply. Some universities, especially at the master's level, may want you to be there for at least a semester or so before they, decide to offer you an assistantship, simply because it gives the professors a chance to get to know you better and really put you, with the correct fit. So don't be disappointed if you're not immediately offered an assistantship. Generally, if you're a high achieving student and a good performer, there are definitely chances down the road. PhD students generally have, first dibs on the funding, because they are there for a much longer period and they're there to actively do research. But there are many universities, especially larger research universities like Wright State, Ohio State, Michigan, all of those, where even master's level students can be eligible for assistantships as well. Generally, the way they work, at least from my experience when I had one when I went through graduate school, is they will typically provide a waiver of the in-state portion of the tuition in some cases. And they may also provide you a monthly stipend of a certain amount. It could be $1,000 or something like that, for example. Generally, it's enough for an international student to both cover their living costs and also pay the non-resident portion of the tuition, which is not covered by the assistantship. So if you can get an assistantship, yes, you're going to be working a lot, either teaching, doing research, or in an administrative capacity. But it is a nice way to try and fund your graduate education for sure. Another thing that we didn't mention, at the undergraduate level, you can also work on campus up to 20 hours per week. So there might be, working in food service, maybe in the residence hall. There can be on-campus jobs as well. It's not necessarily going to help you fund your education per se, but it'll definitely help with your living expenses a little bit, and certainly your pocket money to have fun and entertainment if you can, find a job that's, 20 hours a week as an undergraduate on campus. Okay. And then, so there aren't really assistantship type positions at the undergraduate level. So that is more graduate focused. But at the undergraduate level, you would be looking more for maybe some of those competitive scholarships, and also look at, some of these larger universities and, public universities might have what they call honors programs. So Wright State has an honors program and an honors college. So it is a very competitive competitive bunch of students to get into that program. But once you're in that program, it is a much, it's a small group of students. You take more advanced classes, smaller size, and typically those honors programs, they may also have additional scholarships that students will be available for. So there aren't really assistantships per se, but there can be the competitive scholarships at the undergraduate level. And looking at honors programs is one way to kind of find some of those scholarships.
I'll take Maria's last question. So you can work, like Carl has said, you can work 20 hours on campus with an F1 visa. Now, as an international student, you will have the opportunity to have minimum 1 year of CPT and 1 year of OPT. You probably are thinking, what are those two things? CPT is a curriculum practicum training, which means that you will be taking a year of an internship associated with a class as well. So usually there is a back and forth between the quote-unquote employer and the professor, and is going to be directly related, and many times is also required to the completion of your program. OPT is optional practicum training, is often, and it doesn't have to be, but it's often done at the end of
that come up. I mean, John, Carl, and I are happy to answer any question you may have. It doesn't have to be finance related, especially myself. I will answer anything. This is almost like open forum for anything related to U.S. higher education. Take advantage of us.
You're welcome,
for the
Christina.
next 15 minutes.
I mean, I was an international student, so I Anything that is, I don't have a problem. We can answer anything that we can't answer. You're welcome, friend. We can also switch to other languages if it is okay. Carl can do Russian. I can do Italian.
Well, I think the Italian's going to be a little closer to the Portuguese.
Yes. What was your biggest worry? Student.
I think that's for you, Giancarlo. Technically, I was an international student too. I came to Turkey as an international student.
That probably was the biggest thing. It was leaving home and knowing to come into an area that it was going to be better for me, that I was going to feel okay. So definitely that was my biggest worry. But coming to the United States, then once you get over here, and especially in Dayton, Ohio, you need to understand that the area is very diverse and there's these groups. What I really enjoyed was the fact that it wasn't just Italians that I was feeling comfortable with. It was all these groups from everywhere around the world, Saudi Arabians, Libyans, Venezuelans, Argentinians. It was everywhere. Trust me, Brazilians can be friends with Argentinians. How to produce activities in this pandemic?
I was gonna take Sylvia's question.
Okay.
So Sylvia, I think one of the things you're going to see, especially in this current pandemic period, is that universities are going to be a lot more flexible in terms of how they would evaluate an application. So the nice thing about, I think, many US universities in general is that they've always taken what we call a holistic view of the application anyway. So that's where they look at not just your grades, but kind of your extracurriculars activities as well. But now with the current pandemic period, yes, it's a lot more difficult maybe to show extracurriculars, or maybe you were planning on doing a lot of volunteer service this spring or something, and obviously this happened. Now that got put off. So what you can do in that case is that's where, when you're writing, let's say, your personal essay or your statements of purpose, is where you just kind of center on, how did you cope? How did you cope with this pandemic? What did you do? In terms of, either trying to better yourself even while you're in quarantine or something. Just keep in mind that everybody's in the same situation. So just kind of talk about how, it affected you yourself in that sense. So don't worry per se that you're missing out on having all of these extracurriculars now because you can't do it. You can't do your dance, your theater, your sports, whatever. It all got interrupted. We all know that now, and I think we'll be a lot more flexible in terms of how we look at an application. So don't get hung up on not having, tons of extracurriculars, because I think everybody's going to have a big gap in their resume or their everything else at this point. And then I see for Fernanda as well, in the sense so for test optional, you'll see you do see that many universities are going towards what they call test optional. At the undergraduate level, especially when it concerns SAT or ACT, let's say at Wright State in particular, we've always kind of essentially been test optional in the sense that it's not required for admission purposes. But we do like to see an SAT or an ACT if you want to be competitive for scholarships. And this is generally the case with many US universities nowadays, is that we don't really look at these tests for admission purposes as much as they are just kind of a scholarship filter at this point. And then even SAT or ACT, many universities will also be able to look at your verbal score to, gauge your English ability. So I always tell students, even if the university is technically test optional, it's always in your interest to at least attempt the SAT or ACT, simply because you might be able to not have to take a TOEFL or an IELTS, because you can prove your English ability through an SAT or ACT. So that's a much cheaper path than doing a TOEFL or an IELTS. And then it just helps with your scholarship application as well.
Exactly. There's a lot of outside sources where by having the SAT or ACT, you will be able to get more funding. So it's a multi-layered thing. But also Wright State now also will accept ACT and ACT for English proficiency purposes, as Carl was saying too. Since we're talking about English proficiency, there are other, for Wright State, but there's multiple colleges that are doing, we'll call it a COVID-19 emergency policy, we'll call it. So the for Wright State, for example, there is for the undergrad level, there are serious things that we do accept, one of which is also Duolingo, if you are not familiar with the Duolingo English test. So TOEFL, IELTS, they're all PT, they're all very much accepted, but we can also use the Duolingo test, and also a lot of other things that other tests that you may have done. Don't think that they definitely are not going to be used. You can send those to us and we will evaluate them through our faculty. It might take it might be a longer process with that, but it is possible. What I would advise is when you are looking at your test, if you do have already, see if it's if you do have a B2 or B1 or a C1 level. That is the common European frame of reference grade. And based on that, we can send it to our faculty and they can make a decision if we can accept it for you or not. That is only on the undergrad level, though, I have to say. What would be a good GPA for an undergrad scholarship? Go ahead, Carl. I'll say something after. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, for us at Wright State, we look anywhere at 3.0 or above. We have different tiers. But if you want to be competitive for some of those top scholarships at any university, you're generally looking about a 3.75 or better. If you look at what we require for our trustees, we ask that you meet 2 out of 3 criteria. One of those criteria is a 3.75 or higher. Another criteria is essentially 95th percentile in SAT, so 1360 or better, or that you're in the top 5% of your class. So even technically our top scholarship doesn't require SAT or ACT, but then you have to make sure you meet the other 2 requirements. But if you have that SAT or ACT, again, like I said, it does help, for many things. But GPA generally, as a rule of thumb, once we convert it into US standards, 3.0 or above is where we start looking at, some of our lower tier scholarships. But 3.75 makes you very competitive.
Also, I wanted to add to that the fact that even if you are below that number, you should never feel defeated or that the United States dream is not there. There are what we would call, in a computer term, backdoor ways to be able to access the university world in the United States, is by doing 2+2 maybe with with community colleges. Wright State, for example, and I'm saying Wright State, but multiple colleges in the United States have these type of agreements with community colleges, where the community college will have an open enrollment policy, which means that you do not have to have a GPA. As long as you can apply, you can get there. And then what you do, you spend your 2 years there, and then with Wright State, it's called the Right Path. So you do 2 years there. If you complete that program over there, there are also added scholarships, the opportunities that will start there. But you're also going to be within the same area, and you're also going to be able to, while you're talking to an academic advisor at your community college, you can also talk at your community college with an advisor from Wright State. So what I'm trying to say, Anna, is that your GPA, yes, is important, and you should do the best that you can. Obviously, the better your GPA is, the better the opportunities are there. But even if your GPA is not the greatest, there are still opportunities to come here in the United States. Prior to coming to Wright State, I actually worked in a community college, and I knew a large amount of students from Brazil that have done this path because it was easier for them.
Mm-hmm.
How do universities usually convert grades from Brazil into USA GPA? So there are two ways that universities do it. First, some of them use a third party, West Evaluation, ECE Evaluation. There's different companies where the students will submit their GPA, their transcripts, and then the evaluating company will convert that into US standards and convert the GPA. Wright State does it in-house, and what we do is we search through information through other other websites and other companies that provide us the scale and what it looks like, and then we do our own evaluations done in-house. I hope that answers.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I wanted to say, going back to the community college, Wright State actually has a very unique setup with our community college partner, in the sense that you can actually live in the Wright State dorms while you're going to the community college. So that's actually kind of, a rare exception, because many community colleges themselves do not have dormitories, whereas we have a partnership with our community college partner where you can actually live in the Wright State dormitories but attend the community college. So it's actually pretty cool.
No, yeah, I don't know how I forgot about that, but there's so many different things that you can, like, you could finish a 4-year program with 2 degrees, where you got an associate degree from your community college and then a 4-year degree from your university. So it's talking almost on maximizing your time here in the United States. If you're going to be here for 6 years, let's say, because you want to get also your master's, you're going to be done with 3 degrees rather than having just 2. So in some ways, it's a good way to go if it's possible, but it's not maybe for everybody. It's one of those things that it's an option, and if there is a university that you're really interested in and you should look into also the nearby community colleges and see if that could be a good way to make it there without breaking the bank, we'll put it. Also, because it needs to be said that community colleges tend to be inexpensive compared to 4-year universities.
Yes.
Anybody else? Any questions?
Going once, going twice. Well, I mean, I think we've had the contact information up there for quite a bit. So again, I will encourage. Okay, yeah. See, it's always like you're about to say we're going to leave now, and then somebody throws a question up there. See, it's like I do that on purpose.
I am already graduated in civil engineering. I want to do psychology. Can I join a college community? Yes, I mean, I'm assuming that is at the undergrad level. So you would, do you mean to start degree, or do you mean to go in? Yes, okay. Yeah, I mean, that is not going to mean that we would look at that GPA as well. But I mean, there could be also opportunity that you can then afterwards do this degree and work for 3 years, but not actually have done the science engineering stuff. One really thing that the reason why I was coming up with this idea with the psychology is because there's a lot more psychology in marketing than you would think. So maybe at a graduate level, you might want to think of looking at that kind of stuff. At Wright State, it's called marketing analytics and insight. Oh, maybe check it out.
And then what I also want to throw out there as well is with your engineering background, we also have a very unique program in industrial and human factor psychology.
Yes,
so that's actually looking at the psychology and engineering at the graduate level. So again, reach out to myself or John Carlo, and we can send you some information on that. And we actually had if you look at our Facebook page, about a month ago, we did an interview with one of our human factors professor, talking about that program a little bit as well. I see a question from Fran. Do we have something related to law? If you're looking at the undergraduate level, I mean, yes, in the sense that the way law works in the US, you always have to do an undergraduate. It can be in any discipline before you apply to a law school. If you already have a law degree from Brazil and you're looking to do an LLM, unfortunately, we do not have a law school at Wright State University, but we can certainly recommend you any of the other great universities in the surrounding area, whether that's University of Dayton, Ohio State, etc., if you wanted to do an LLM type program. But if you want to start at the undergraduate level, absolutely, we can help you with that and put you kind of through a pre-law progression, and then you could apply to law school afterwards. Okay, I see you do want LLM. So, I mean, go ahead. I mean, if you send me an email, I'll still, point you to some of the other great universities around us that you could look at for LLM for sure.
Fran, the OPT, the 3-year OPT for law, it's very hard to, I don't know if that is possible or not. I will not lie to you. The 3-year OPT, it has to be within those science fields. But right now, they're creating like I said, like with that marketing and analytics and insight, it is extremely easy to find these hybrid programs where they become STEM school, oh my God, I'm finding a loser word. I want to say it in Italian, but I shouldn't. It's probably essentially that they're STEM accredited, we'll put it that way. So what I would do if you're looking at something like business law, like you're saying, and it depends on the program and it depends on the school. A lot of times, if you're looking at business analytic law, then maybe there could be some STEM in there, but I will have to say that I haven't heard of a business law that is a STEM related school. I hope that answers your question. Maybe not in the way that you would like it, but.
I see there's a question there about differentiating a professional and an academic master's. Typically, I view, let's say, professional masters to be something like an MBA or maybe a master's of public health or a master's of public policy. Generally, a professional master's is what I consider kind of like a terminal master's degree. And generally, or unfortunately, especially for this presentation, professional master's degrees generally do not have as much funding available because they expect you to make a return on your investment and that you'll get something out of earning that professional degree, especially an MBA. Whereas an academic degree, that's going to be typically more of your Master of Arts or Masters of Science type degrees. And, that could be engineering, biomedical research, things like that. The academic type degrees, especially even at the master's level, you might find some, again, to be able to get some of those research or those teaching assistantships. There could be possibilities for those. So if there are research or if there's a progression into an eventual PhD type program, those academic type degrees generally tend to have a little more funding available than a professional master's would. but a professional master's, again, it's something that you do in 2 years, and that they expect you to take advantage of OPT and get a return on your investment. Not a problem. Okay.
Anytime. Absolutely, you guys can email us or contact us at any time. We're more than willing to answer any of your questions. And hopefully maybe one day I actually get to come to Brazil, because I was supposed to come in March and then I couldn't come. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Well, I think that essentially wraps it up for the hour, but like as we keep saying, please reach out to us. I mean, we are here to be a resource, and even if we cannot help you at Wright State, we will generally tell you, well, our colleagues at this particular university can help you. So we like to at least find a way to help you one way or the other.
I will definitely do that, friend. I will definitely do that. And if I see Falcao walking around, I'm probably going to lose my mind.
Guys, thank you so much for this webinar. You answered a bunch of questions. I learned a lot today also. And thank you a lot.
No, thank you for having us. This was really fun.
No problem. It was fun, indeed. Can we wrap it up?
Well, yeah.
Right.
I mean, I think that's wrapping it up from my end. So again, thank you all, and good evening, good day, whatever time it is there. Good night for me.
Yeah, good night for Carl.
Oh, wow.
Okay, cheers.
Good one, guys.
Bye.
Bye.